had to start meditating or something for that, right?
There's no way that makes sense to get here. So he won't do that much.
I had to do cholesterol.
Then you should want him to do it.
It's like,
To do it well.
It will. So we need to talk about, changing the timeline.
Morning, everybody.
How you doing?
Morning, John.
See you? I don't get to see you very often. I like that
Talk
better.
about different scaling, more meetings and all of that. So last week. Yes. So the BCC voted last week to cancel their October 7th.
Where's the crowd?
So now we can no longer use that to schedule the shade meeting. I don't know what we're gonna do. We'll rerun that timeline. Yes.
yeah.
And I think Allison's consideration still having the shade meeting on the 14th and then just that. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm gonna come up with something on that and send it to you. Okay.
Bruce, they're back up. Okay, with your.
Yeah, yeah, we had the had a little memorial service for him Sunday. Back to normal now.
But they're all back.
Oh, yeah.
So he lost one of the surveyors. No, I didn't. Yeah. 28 years old, strong.
8-year-old son, single parent. A really, really good parent. He was.
Horace, you guys ready? All right. Dapper as always. All right. Good morning, everyone. I'd like to hereby call to order the Escambia County Planning Board Workshop for September 21st. We do have a quorum. I think we're missing 2 members, and we are missing our Navy representative, but other than that, we have a full board. At this time, I'll ask everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. Staff members, was the meeting published properly?
Because it was just a workshop, it was only put in the BCC weekly meeting.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, Horace, who will be leading the discussion today, or?
It's going to be a we discussion this morning.
Okay.
That means it's going to include Mr. John Fisher. He's a Urban Planner 3. Mr. Shannon Pugh, he's the division manager for GIS, and also to as needed, which is always needed, Ms. Kiel Johnson from our legal department. So as you know, I did not provide a lot of historical context of the sector plan, because I think many of you that have been with the board, you already know about it, because I think the newest member, he's been engaged with opt-out, so he's very, very familiar with the sector plan. It is a master plan that the county adopted basically in 2011 to help guide development in the section of the county. You have 2 parts. You have the north, you have the Jacks Branch, and the Muskogee sector plan. All of those things have been in place. We do have, how many developed? We got like 2 subdivisions that have been platted. But, yes, the 3rd one is under construction. But other than that, we have not had no, in the regional employment area, we have not had no businesses come in yet for that portion of the DSAP. So the legislators, they put in a provision where people will have opt-outs. And we had several opt-out cases. So the board began to have another, and I said the key word, another discussion on the removal of the sector plan. And before I do want to say this with this disclaimer for the public, because I know I'm being watched and people sometimes, they take, well, you said things at workshop, why has it changed? Because it's a workshop. Workshops are meant to have general discussions, and as we proceed further, other things may change. So it's not anything concrete that's absolute, it's not anything absolute concrete. It's supposed to change as we proceed further. So, very quickly, again, in 2016, there was some other discussion again on removing the sector plan in 2016. At the time, we had a committee of the whole discussion with the planning board after we met, with the BCC, after we met with DEO, Juan Lemos, Drew, and myself. We took a visit to DEO, and we met with them, and they gave us some points. At the time, the county administrator, he said, well, let's have a committee of the whole discussion, and let's engage with the board. And we did. And during that time, each commissioner had the opportunity to speak with, if they wanted to speak with the head of DEO, Mr. James Stanberry. So as you can see from the meeting summary that we had in 2016, the question was posed regarding the ability to remove the sector plan in its entirety, and DEO said this at the time. You can, but if you remove, you cannot remove in parts. It's all or nothing. All or nothing. So they weighed the options. The BCC, they weighed the options on with discussion of DSAP. And again, there was some large investment on some large investors who began to talk to the board about different things. So therefore, that action never ever proceeded. So just recently, that discussion came up again. Next slide, please. And the board said again, can we engage discussion with removal of the sector plan? And the BCC had a meeting. They said, yes, staff, let's have a strong consideration for the removal. I sent y'all a copy of the link of the minutes, because many times I wanted y'all to see the verbatim minutes as well as listen to the discussion that the board had. So the motion may not have been as clear as some of you asked when we first had the discussion, but I think the minutes was clear. So they did so this is why we're here today. So as we proceed with having this discussion, we will have to change the land development code. There are sections inside the land development code that talks about the opt-out procedures and the guidelines for the sector plan. All of that will have to be removed as well. We will have to basically change and remove text. It's going to be a two-part. It's going to be a text amendment as well as map change. We have to change some of the text provision of the comprehensive plan as well. So legal will be working with us wholeheartedly and consistently as we proceed to those start having those discussions. So the next slide. And if there's any questions, you can stop at any point and ask your questions.
Horace, just
Yes,
as an overview, I know this is a very complex issue, and this may be oversimplification of it, but is it fair to say that one of the biggest challenges with the sector plan is that it's net zero when it comes to density, meaning that the entire area, although when the overlay was put in place, there was properties that may have changed. You could not increase density across the entire area. Is that fair to say as just a general statement?
Yes, that's a general statement, because when the sector plan was adopted, those the rules, the provisions, the data, the maps, everything was adopted by the board, and everything was set with the provisions being codified inside the comprehensive plan, as well as with the performance standards with the with the DSAP requirements. So those things, they were set in place, and they were hard to alter, in which when you do a master plan you shouldn't be able to just to deviate and change them just because someone may like it or they may want to. So those things were put in place, and there were no options given for basically to change. Now, you could have did some things, but we would have to go back to Tallahassee, in which that's probably going to be coming soon, and make some alterations, and it would have been a very, very complicated process, in which, again, that was the purpose of it. The sector plan new process, it was a way of trying to avoid the DRE process. That was Development Regional Aspect. That's why the Tallahassee adopted it, because the DRI process was extremely challenging and difficult to go through. So they came with this next step legislation, the sector plan, and Escambia County was one of the first counties to proceed. But what made ours so unique, I'm going a little back, because of the amount of parcels. We had approximately, if I hope my numbers are correct, about 15,000 parcels. That was a large land area. And at the time, it was doable, but as time started rolling with the economy, things sort of went a little awkward.
Typically, the sector plans in other parts of the state, I think there's 6 or 7 of them, they're all single landowners.
Yes.
So that's where we have a major difference with our plan.
Absolutely. That's what made ours sort of challenging, extremely. I'm not going to minimize or try to negate. It made it challenging to work with and to deal with. And then there was many of the property owners who were claiming, who stated that there was no meetings, that they didn't know about it, and it was thrown and thrust upon them. Mr. Barry, I think you was involved with those. I'm sorry, Commissioner Brisky. I may be
Don't
saying-
give me that title. I don't want that one.
Yes, yes, Mr. Brisky, you was involved with those meetings, but sometimes when people said things, and sometimes their perspective carries a lot of weight. So there was many challenges and mountains and hurdles for the sector plan. So this is why we're here today. So are there any other questions? If I'm talking too fast, please slow me down.
I remember reviewing that and just a general comparison with other sector plans and bringing out the fact that we were 15,000 parcels-ish. I remember asking how many landowners that represents, the people. 15,000 parcels, 10,000 plus at least landowners. But then since 2011, there's been change of ownership. Can you review for us what kind of publish
Take these notes.
or notifications or advisement are buyers of a parcel in a sector plan? What are they given as an education into what they are buying?
Well, the information is available for buyers someone who may want to come in today, want to buy a parcel that is in the sector plan.
Passive or active?
It is as active as they make it. And that's and I'm
there's
not being
no
facetious.
requirement.
There is no.
And I think
there's
what he's
no-
getting
there's-
at is there's no real estate disclosure requirement or anything like that.
Not
It's just,
not for the sector plan.
right, it would just be like any other zoning or statute in an area,
Absolutely.
you would have to research it.
Do your own due diligence, and the information is on our website, and the parcels are there. Mr. Shannon has the map, so if someone click on it, you'll be able to see that, hey, my parcel is in, and basically information does get out because we have real estate agents call us all the time about parcels up there, and they want to come and say, hey, oh, I'm in the sector plan. What is this about? So the information is available to the real estate community, but again, there is no real estate disclosure. It's not required for the sector plan. So I hope I answered your question. So this is where we are today. Again, as we proceed with the planning board, there will be several ordinances that will be required. Ordinance 1, repealing the DSAP completely and the sector plan in its entirety. There will be a second ordinance that would be required, comprehensive plan text amendment for the purpose of removing all comprehensive references to the sector plan. Those are the text provisions. And this is the one, ordinance number 3, this is the one where, because we do have some large landowners, all of them, I don't think all of them are present today, but we do know that one group is definitely present. There's another group that we have spoken with. And I want to say this, as you can see from the minutes, from the BCC meeting, and from the BCC minutes that was sent to you as well. They was adamant about making those large investments whole. They don't want no one to be challenged, because there's a lot of investment backing that many of these investors, as well as not, I don't want people to say, well, you just focus on the investors. But again, there are many other stakeholders that have invested a tremendous amount of inquiry and funds in their land. Some of them have already did some things. So the BCC was adamant about that, to make sure that we could provide wholeness as much as we possibly can, to make sure that there is no actions that may come upon this board for some unforeseen consequences as far as taking actions and taking claims. Now, of course, we do know, let me say this, we do know that it's not going to be perfect, but we're going to do our level best to try to make sure that we make everybody whole. Because many of the properties in this ordinance 3, many of the properties, as we remove the sector plan, the underlying future land use category, the underlying future land use category is going to have to come into play. Many of them already had zonings changes. And if you remove it, the zoning and the future land use category is not going to match. That's going to create a nonconformity, an inconsistency. Tallahassee, the state statute is adamant about this. We got to have consistency. We got to have conforming parcels. So staff will be looking at the data and looking at the ordinances and with the help of our legal department. Also, too, I want to say this at this time. Staff will be exploring, engaging for some assistance with Ordinance 3, because there will be a lot of data and analysis that's going to be necessary to make sure, because we will be assigning a new future land use category. So we will be engaging with some professional, we would like to engage with some professional assistance so that we can make sure that we get this as accurate as it should be in meeting the Florida statutory requirements. That means we may have to engage with a consultant, but we will be exploring that option. And because that's the most critical. To remove the future land use category, that comes back into play. The zones may not match, so we're going to have to make sure we assign a consistent future land use category. We have to work backwards. So, because we got to have conformity. So now, there will be some parcels that once we remove it, they may be already good, whole. That's fine. They may have the perfect zoning, perfect flow. We hope we get many of them. That'll make it easier for staff as we proceed with that delicate task. And that's going to be very, very precarious. Mr. Brisky?
Horace, I failed to do something when we first started. Although I recognize most of the folks that are in the audience here today, I would like for, if you want to speak, please fill out one of the speaker request forms so that I can call on you when the appropriate time. Like I said, just mainly for formality, and we will also have a record so that you can receive follow-ups on anything that changes going forward. So please make sure you put your email address on there to make sure that you stay in the loop on this. So with that, go ahead, Horace.
I will again. Yes, and as I said before, on this portion, staff would definitely be looking into engage a consultant with this action, because that's going to again, this is going to be critical. The data and analysis portion is a mandatory requirement, because of what we do know and the timing and the staffing, and we're going to need some additional professional assistance in this matter. So, because that is critical. Again, the next slide, I'm on GIS parcel review. Thank you. Mr. Shannon, as you can see in some of the slides coming up, we've already did a very preliminary assessment. Very preliminary. This data will be scrubbed again of all of the parcels and the zonings that, if it's moved, what it would be. So, as you can see, based on the initial review, there will be multiple parcels that will require an assignment of a consistent future land use category. I stated that, I'm restating that again. Number 2, agriculture flue is the predominant flue that was previously assigned to that area. And yes, and that's why the sector plan basically was adopted, because of the future land use category and not wanting to do a DRI process. And 3, any parcel already developed on the sector plan, DSAP, the design standards and the ability to return to the county staff and act to develop areas previously protected under the sector plan standards. Again, once we remove the sector plan, if the board makes a decision and makes it a process and the decision is to remove the sector plan, that will definitely include the DSAP standards as well. The DSAP standards, the guidelines, and this has all of the infrastructure requirements, the way that it looks. All of this will have to be removed as well. We cannot piecemeal it at all. Keep one, keep the other. Now, if a developer, I want to say this adamantly, if it is removed, if a developer want to take these standards and want to yet use them, we welcome that. Because, again, it came with some high performance standards. And to make it look better, to make a development look better. So if they want to, on their own accord, to do that, staff is not going to have no problem with that at all.
Horace, your last statement on this screen, talking about non-conforming parcels.
Yes.
So that is non-conforming parcels as of now?
Yes.
Okay, and so let's just make sure that's clear, that is as of now, those,
As of now.
The list that we have, and as the changes are made, they'll be adjusted accordingly. But what will happen to these non-conforming parcels that are out there now? Will they remain in that status? Will they have any change affected to them because of these?
We're going to have to, because we got to submit all the parcels to DEO.
Okay.
So that's going to be a very cumbersome process. So DEO, according to the state statutes, we cannot have inconsistency with the future land use categories and the zoning. So when if it's inconsistent, we're going to have to make it consistent. We're going to have to assign a consistent future land use category. Now, unless, and that could be challenging. I like to be transparent and open and honest, like I always am, try to be. That may be some upzonings in some of those parcels. Maybe some upzonings, but we cannot, according to state statute, submit parcels that are inconsistent with the future land use category and zonings. So that's why we're going to look at the data and scrub it try to, at this stage, when we get down to it, and then we're going to have even if we may miss a few, which I know we will, let's be transparent and clear. We will, because it's not going to be a perfect product. But legal is going to be working with us on providing some type of savings clause, like we did for the land development code when we did that, a savings clause, and that's currently inside the land development code when we had that major rewrite for the land development code. So we're going to be working with that type of language as well. Now, let me say this as well, since you brought that up, Ms. Kaprisky. The sector plan is still in place right now. So if anyone, if a stakeholder, if they want to come in and continue and submit something under the sector plan standards and review, that's rather smart. I'm just going to leave it like that. That's rather smart. I'm going to leave it like that. You understood? You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Briscoe?
Absolutely.
Good. Again, Expressio has already been created to review all of the non-conforming parcels. So we will be working with everyone, not just the large stakeholders, because somebody accused me of, you just always said developers. Any stakeholder, let me be clear with that, any stakeholder that's in the sector plan, if they want to have a review of the parcel, please come and see us, because you have equity in your land as well.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask Horace if I understood, I read this, and it seems to me the Board of County Commissioners would like us to take the good, keep the good, throw away the bad, and make it all wrap up in a nice, neat package, which I understand for all parties. But I'm assuming that it obviously isn't that easy, and that a savings clause nor an opt-out is going to be the cure-all for this. Is that, I mean, because I think we could save time if that was the answer, that we would just let's figure that out and move on. But that's, I doubt it's going to be that simple. Is that what I'm hearing you?
Mr.
'Cause
Powell?
you want to say, I mean, I understand the state says you either keep it or you remove it, 100%, one way or the other. And the opt-out and the savings is kind of contrary to that. Is that correct?
Well, this is the thing. If there is a savings clause, the savings clause is going to be if we miss a parcel and we basically missed one, they come and say yes, but we have the choice to try to make you whole as well. It's like just in case if we miss a few, and even with the land development code, we missed some, but the savings clause was there out. So hey, let's make it right. So again, we know that it's not going to be a perfect product, but we're going to do our level best to try to make it perfect. Because I have started my review. I have not seen any other state yet remove the sector plan, so we're going to be another test case again. So as you can see from the maps, and we will have larger maps, and you can always expand upon them. They're going to be for the public. I know someone said, well, I can't see these maps. Again, this is a PowerPoint presentation. You may not be able to see every parcel, but the maps are available for anyone that want to come in and look at it, look at the parcels in question. You have the sector plan map. That's the first map. You have the existing future land use map. And then you have the current sector plan, current zoning. So the current zoning and the FLU, that's what we'll be looking at once the sector plan and all its regulations are removed. We'll be looking at that to make sure we get consistency. And just by looking at the second map, you can see there's a lot of green, which is agriculture. There's a lot of RC. There's not many mixed-use suburban. Not many mixed-use urban, even in the regional employment area. So those are the things that we're going to really have to look at. So it's going to take, that's why the need for some professional assistance again. We will definitely be engaging in that and having discussions on that. Next slide, please. Are there any questions from any questions? That means if there's any questions, I must be doing pretty good, I guess. That's why I sound like, yes, Mr. Briscoe.
We're just all waiting to see how you're going to fix it all.
Yes, indeed. So, as you can see, Mr. Shannon, we did a very, very high 30,000 foot level at what we came across so far. You can see we have the AG 15 zoning non-compatible, acreage 1,742. So you can see the chart. I don't have to read it verbatim, go through each one. I'm not, if you know, I'm gonna stay on this slide for a little bit. If there's any questions, you can look at it and. And Shani, you want anything to say on this slide, please, come.
Hi, Shannon Pugh,
Morning.
manager GIS.
Hey, Shannon.
One of the
Shannon, let me turn it
There
on.
you go.
is it on?
Okay, thank you.
Oh, okay. One of the parts you really might want to focus on is the non-compatible zoning categories for each one of
Yes.
those, because it kind of breaks down what we're looking for there. And from my analysis, it looks like the ag and the RC are the ones that have had the rezonings that are going to be the most of the issues. And some of the others, the conservation with the public, I think that's the landfill, and that probably won't be much of an issue. And the HCL for the mixed-use suburban, the HCL zonings.
Right.
I understand that sometimes those are compatible, but when I did this analysis, I didn't really delve
Right.
into it that strong. So
Shannon.
those might be all right.
Let me add to this, but I know we have people listening. Inside the land development code, there are certain type of uses that are allowed in heavy commercial, light industrial, with a future land use category. As a matter of fact, that change on the ordinance, it was because of a challenge, and we had to go back and take another look at that. So, currently inside the land development code, there are certain type of uses, heavy commercial and heavy commercial, light industrial, that are compatible with the mixed-use suburban future land use categories for those parcels. And other uses are not. So we're gonna have to really look at that. We may have to sort of engage with what are your expectations, or just say you can keep it because you, right now, but if you bring any more other uses outside of the land development code, you won't be able to allow that because that ordinance is already in place. And so, and it is part of this, the comprehensive plan as well, so it's already been adopted. But there are certain uses that are in the heavy commercial light industrial that are not allowed with a mixed-use suburban future land use category. I want to say that just in case someone, well, we are aware, we do know that, and there's an ordinance on the books inside the development code that specifies those uses. Thank you, Shannon, for the observation.
Another thing I noticed is that it's really not that many parcels. You're looking at 37 parcels, but they do comprise almost 20% of the whole sector plan area. So if y'all have any questions about that, that's all I've got on that chart.
Okay, next slide. Any questions on the table? Again, this is at 30,000 foot level, just a, thank you for the summary, Shannon. And Shannon, go ahead with the next maps.
And then this is just maps, basically, of the table you just saw. It breaks it down by each category, and those are the two I was talking about that had the most rezonings, the ag and the RC. And what's depicted on the map are the actual non-conforming zonings. So then you can go to the next one. And then the one on the left is where the landfill has a non-conforming zoning, and then the HCLIs and the MUS flu. So, were there any more maps? Okay. So anybody have any questions on those maps?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, all right.
Yeah, so, thank you, Shannon. So again, that's gonna be the crux of this whole, and I do wanna say this respectfully to everyone that's listening and everyone that's present. There could have been some other, comments or statements that were made, or some things I'm not aware of, as far as infrastructure needs and infrastructure agreements. At this point, I don't have no authority over those decisions at all. And this board, the planning board, don't have any authority over any of those infrastructure commitments or roadway networks. It's beyond my authority to have or engage in discussions in. Yes, you need to be aware of it, but that's beyond me. I can't make no commitments to say, yes, we agree to this infrastructure I don't have the authority to make those commitments at all. That would be handled at another level other than the planning board. Next slide, Rachel, thank you. You can see, I think you read that. I don't have to read that again. That's public record, so you read it. And it's for, if anyone else wants to see it, you can see the motion that was made by the board. And that is the presentation, I believe, at this point. Are there any questions for me or for my staff? Again, we're just having workshops. There could be some changes if going forward. So this is just at a 30,000-foot level. No commitments are made at this time, just with the understanding and providing direction on what the board engaged in and the direction given from this staff. And we do have the assistant county administrator, Ms. Debbie Byers. She's here as well.
Okay. Anything else from staff before we open it up for some public comments? All right. Who is, yes, sir. We'll turn these in and we'll get everyone who'd like to speak on it. Thank you. Mr. Dunaway? Morning, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.
If you'd please state your name and your interest in this proceeding so we all know where you're coming from.
Yes, sir. My name is Will Dunaway from the law firm of Clark Partington, and I represent Mr. Hemmer and his investment group here today. Mr. Chairman,
I'm sorry, Mr. Dunaway. Could you, I think it's like, because we have like several exits, could you state exit 1, exit 3?
Okay. Yes, sir. So, Mr. Hemmer's investment group is exit 3, Clearwater 102, and exit Clearwater. So there are essentially, and my presentation will show that, but it was those in the northern portion of the sector plan, basically Mr. Shannon's map of what would be incompatible if you were to remove the sector plan, but which point, as the chairman pointed out, is today not incompatible because we have a sector plan. We were one of the groups that came in and rezoned our property according to the sector plan, following the procedures of the county. So, Mr. Chairman, preceding, and I know Mr. Jones touched on this because he knew that I was coming up, and I understand the authority of this board, but this is where it starts, and so this is where it's important to lay the foundation. Preceding the establishment of the sector plan, the county sought and obtained the obligations of the 3 largest landowners in the area to contribute without cost to the county the critical rights-of-way which would then form the vital transportation routes and networks to support this sector plan, and importantly, the I-110 Beulah exchange. I just want to point out and to go back a little bit, at a county commission meeting in September the 5th of 2013, there was an action that modified the initial approval process that allowed for rezonings without the implementation of the Transportation Memorandum of Agreement. And it laid out some of the background that I think is important for this board and for staff and eventually for the commissioners when they consider this and how they consider it. Because we've heard very clearly from the commissioners in their motion, which Mr. Jones provided, and he emphasized it today, that the commissioners are very intent on this process honoring the commitments that have been made, those commitments of which investor-backed expectations have been put forward in the approximate 12 years that this sector plan has been in force. So there was an original memorandum of understanding. It was approved in 2007, again, preceding the sector plan. Because again, board members, you know, and if it would be helpful if, do you have this map that you can throw up? You know that this created an entire community, if you will, or series of communities. But it created this in essentially mostly agricultural, undeveloped, vacant properties. So the only thing that connects these are infrastructure to be built in the future, right? So infrastructure to be built in the future connects all of this. So there was this agreement, this MOU in 2007, and it involved, at the time, the three largest landholders in the sector plan. And Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I have a copy of what it was the layout of Woodlands Parkway that I'd like to provide.
Okay, thank you, sir.
To staff. May I approach?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
And because we're in workshop here, we're a little less formal. We don't have to make any motions to accept. The gentleman's presenting as information for us, so thank you.
And I want to say this, and as Mr. Will Dunaway passed information out, our transportation department, the engineering department, they would definitely be engaged early on the transportation and infrastructure status. So they would definitely be engaged.
And members of the planning board, Mr. Rusty Thompson is here, and following my presentation will be Mr. Hemmer, who represents the investment group, and then Mr. Thompson will come and talk to you precisely about Woodlands Parkway. But this gives you context, and you'll see that Woodlands Parkway is in fact the spine of the sector plan. It is what allows the sector plan, its communities, its neighborhood, its town centers. It's how you get there. It is the north-south route from what would be the Beulah Exchange. It provides that secondary exit route and the northwest in the north-south corridor. So the sector plan's formal agreement was signed, as you know, in 2008. The conceptual long-term build-out overlay of the sector plan goals, objectives, and policies were incorporated into the EAR-based amendments. The adoption package was approved in 2011. Notice of the intent went forward in also in 2011. And as part of that process, as staff has pointed out, the detailed specific area plan, which provides the defined development standards for the area, were put into place. Again, importantly, all of this was preceded by the infrastructure agreement, the MOU, which laid out the terms of these large developers donating the right-of-way to the county in the precise location of the layout of, in this case, Woodlands Parkway, and importantly, the three important east-west connectors to Woodlands Parkway, starting at the north being Quintet. The extension of Quintet was envisioned to go to Jack's Branch, the next one being Well Line Road, and then in the south, Kingsville. So, commissioners, now move forward into 2015. Per the sector plan, Mr. Hemmer and his group, SALT and this board, together with the Board of County Commissioners, approve the rezoning of its parcels to be consistent with the sector plan. Because again, when the sector plan was put into place, the sector plan became the overarching future planning document. The underlying zoning, however, was still as it was when the sector plan was put in place. So in fact, at that point, essentially, the zoning was incompatible with the sector plan, if you will. So Mr. Himmer and his investment group brought forth, because they were moving forward with under the sector plan, and you approved their rezoning. And that is how you got to the area of the map that Mr. Shannon pointed out, which would now then be inconsistent if you remove the sector plan. Now we will have had zoning, which is consistent with the sector plan, which now will be inconsistent with the future land use. And that's what we would need to make sure was compatible. And of course, you know this, but I think it's worth stating. The reason that is critically important is because the planning department cannot issue a development order if there is an inconsistency, because that development order would be illegal and would not survive any challenges. So the property could not be developed if you don't do this correctly. It would be undevelopable property. You could not seek, and the staff could not issue a development order. So this is why on this background material that was provided to you by staff, you saw this non-compatible. Again, I want to point out, it's not non-compatible because we've done anything incorrectly. It would be non-compatible if the sector plan goes away. It's perfectly consistent today because Mr. Himmer and his investment group took the necessary steps to ensure its consistency by coming to you in an open forum and then seeking approval and getting that approval from the BCC. So the parcels are very consistent with the sector plan, but inconsistent with what is the underlying future land use, such that when you take away the overlay of the sector plan, the underlying future land use, it will exist, and that is where that inconsistency comes to. Now, Mr. Chairman, I hope that you were provided copies of a memorandum that I provided to you through staff. That was on, and it just kind of laid out some of this background, but I wish, if it pleases the board, to just point out a couple of the points. Again, in addition to complying with all the other requirements under the Community Planning Act, the sector plan included both a framework that included the uses, densities, and intensities, as it is supposed to do. The policies guiding the development form, important. The intergovernmental coordination, which importantly in my emphasis here, includes the transportation portion. Because once the sector plan went into effect, it was then, that is, once it became legally effective, all long-range transportation plans of the Municipal Planning Authority had to be consistent with the sector plan, meaning all of the planning that has been going on with the county engineering and roads, with the DOT, with the Regional Planning Authority, all of that has been going forward for the last 15 years, understanding that this is going to be the plan for the county, that there will be a Woodlands Parkway that provides the spine which allows for an intersection at Beulah, at the Beulah connector to I-10, which allows for all of these future homeowners in these future neighborhoods, in these future town centers, in this future regional employment area, who will be there to get around. That is, to move north and south on Woodlands Parkway, to move east and west on Kingsville, an extension, to move east and west on Well Line Road, and to move east and west on a Quintet extension from 29 to Jack's Branch. All of that is part of that planning and has been part of that planning for over a decade. So, as has been the water resources, the water supply development, the school districts planning for population. So therefore, these requirements are already in force based on the sector plan. and therefore must be taken into account if the sector plan is removed, and what it then is replaced by is the traditional underlying FLU and the zoning, which of course some have been rezoned and some have not. The point being is that it's not enough to just say to Mr. Jones, make sure all of the parcels are zoned correctly and consistent with the FLU, and everything is fine. That's not enough in this situation, because the sector plan carried with it many more requirements, just like future land use does. But the future land use in this case was wrong. I mean, not wrong, but it wasn't the sector plan, right? It was agriculture. So there wasn't a need for a spine up through the middle of it, because it's agriculture and it's been developed the way it has been developed now. But when the sector plan went into place, according, you can look, I mean, there's a town center here in the middle of this now silviculture area, right? And that town center, you remove the sector plan, it's gonna say zone, it's gonna say the future land use is agriculture, but you're going to be forced, because of the process of keeping those densities, to change it to a compatible, which could be commercial or mixed-use suburban, mixed-use urban even in that area, and you're not gonna have a road to it. And if you don't solve that now, that road will never, in my humble opinion, get built, because it's not going to be economically, there's going to be no economic incentive for the large landowners who now own the property which underlies Woodlands Parkway, the extension of Quintet, the extension of Wellline, and the extension of Kingsville. There will be no incentive for them to donate it to the county, as it was required by the underlying MOU, which preceded the sector plan, which then moved this process. So that brings us here today, and the reason Mr. Hemmer hired me to bring this forward to you, because as the large landowner in the northern part of the sector plan, and I think it's important, and Mr. Hemmer will point this out, but I think it's important at this point to state that we are not initiating this process, right? So this is not a process which we are initiating. But because it has been initiated, and because, as Mr. Jones stated, it was discussed in 16 and now coming forward now, it is important for us and our investors to bring forth this background, because it's going to be a hot mess if it's not solved for the reasons that I point out. So as largest landowner, Mr. Hemmer and his investment group support the sector plan removal, as long as the planned right-of-ways for Woodlands Parkway and the Quintet Road extension are in place. Now, the important point of that process was that original agreement called for the large landowners to donate the right-of-way to the county so that they did not have to acquire it. That's critically important, because to go forward to acquire it to build essentially a brand new road, essentially a brand new Highway 29 further to the west going up, would be very difficult, and it could be very inconsistent in both time and location. And Mr. Thompson is here to lay out why the very detailed planning that went into the location of this roadway, and why it was so very important. So again, Mr. Hemmer and the investment group support the removal or repeal, however we're referring to it, of the sector plan, as long as the county reaffirms its infrastructure commitments, again, that form the basis of this sector plan. And that was in the form of an agreement, a development agreement, which was signed by the original 3 landowners. Now, Mr. Jones pointed out that there was a period of time after the 15, and then there were in 2016. This was first discussed after the first opt-out, and the commissioner started thinking, wait a minute, if we have 15,000 parcels, and we've now created a process of opting out, and we're on record as saying anyone who wants to opt out will allow it, and so we're going to have a whole bunch of inconsistencies, and we're going to have a whole bunch of potential opt-outs. Are we really going to have a future long-term plan that's really going to have some integrity? At that point, Mr. Hemmer and his investment group went to the county and said, okay, we're not one of the original 3 that signed on the dotted line. Mr. Hemmer and his investment group acquired it after this process was in place. So the sector plan was in place when they made their investment into the property and acquired it from one of the 3 original ones. But they went to the county and said, but we will honor our commitment. And since we own the large portion of the right-of-way for Woodlands Parkway and all of the Quintet extension, we're committed to donating that to the county. We just need the county commitment to extend Quintet Road. We will build our portion, and we need and so we work together, and the county commissioners ask us, or a county commissioner asked us to go forward and work with the other 3 landowners to try to reinitiate that process. We were not able to reach agreements with everyone in the county, and so that process did not get put forward. But the underlying agreements still exist. And Mr. Hemmer and his investment group are here to say again that we're committed to do that. We're committed to donate the right-of-way to Woodlands, our portion of Woodlands Parkway and the Quintet, if the county commissioners and the county will commit to extending the roadway. Because without it, board, you can see very, very clearly that if you remove the sector plan and its infrastructure tie-ins without a commitment and a mechanism to ensure that commitment is there. And that commitment was that the right-of-way would be donated, and that portion of the roadway that services property, that is, if, for instance, if the roadway, in his example up here, is going through parcels that Mr. Hemmer's investment group touches and accesses, then they build that portion. They fund it, they build it. So there's only a small portion that you see, there is a portion of it that is county responsibility, because we're not saying that, Mr. and Miss Jones, who happen to own a parcel which happens to be alongside the right-of-way, have to pay for that road. We're not saying that. We're saying the point is we're volunteering to do that. That's part of the investment that we're making. So again, we're committed to doing that as long as this is taken care of. We also want to put forth one other commitment, and that is we're also committed to ensuring that sewer is provided to every development that we put in place. This is a critical, again, important, this is both an environmental issue and it's just helpful from that standpoint. Mr. Hemmer and his investment group are committed to that. We believe that ought to be part of the removal process too. And then again, it goes without saying that the county must ensure that the densities, intensities, and uses which are allowed in the sector plan are preserved in the underlying zoning and the future land use. So the last point that I want to make is that time is of the essence here. As you know, the market is here now. Mr. Hemmer and his investment group rezoned their property in 2015. We have development orders that have been pulled in this sector plan that are moving forward. We have projects that are in planning now, and quite frankly, we're at a a little bit of a quandary. We've been told to design them according to the standards without a sector plan, but the sector plan is still in force, so were we to come in tomorrow, we're under the sector plan. And so we don't need this process. The last time it was discussed was in 16, it's now 2021. We can't wait 5 years. This is going to be developed or sold. This process is moving forward now. And so speed is important, but certainty is critical. I mean, you just cannot invest money with uncertainty. So it's the certainty and the speed that is very important. Again, as long as the county lives up to its promises that it made to the people when it put in place the sector plan, again, that promise ensured that the transportation infrastructure would be in place to accommodate these increases in densities. And again, if you don't get that right-of-way donation concretely established now, you will be creating a big mess that will plague planning and zoning much more so than the current issues that it has with opting out and the sector plan now. And those transportation problems and woes will be with the county forever if they're not solved now. Thank you, Mr. Brisky, for the opportunity to speak. I'd like to introduce Mr. Hemmer next.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dunaway.
And again, we're here if there are any questions.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I'm sorry, they have a couple questions.
I have three questions. Number one for Horace and staff. How much property does the county own in the sector plan, if any?
For these landfill, the only thing I can think of right now.
Shannon, can you Shannon answer that question, please?
Just a ballpark estimate of acreage?
Do we have that PowerPoint still up? Because if you pull up the spreadsheet, yeah, so, yeah, we're looking at, probably, 1,448 acres. That would be the conservation future land use, so. There may be, there's a ballpark off of Well Line Road, and I'm not sure it may fall in the sector plan too, but yeah, I'm not exactly sure about that one, but yeah.
But again,
Probably,
we'll get it. We'll get you information.
Okay.
Yeah.
yeah, probably 2,000 acres, somewhere in that range.
Okay,
probably.
I appreciate that. The next question I had is, could we get a copy of the gentleman's presentation
Yes.
of the point paper? And thirdly, for our school board rep, how many schools how many government schools are currently above Well Line Road? And is the school district prepared for a development explosion in that area going forward?
We have, I'd have to, yeah, I'm not real good with the north end geography, but, you know, this would be something that would be put into our facilities plan as we move forward. Right now, you know, we just have to keep in touch with everything that's going on. I mean, luckily we have the citizens, taxpayers have given us money for facilities, so as long as we can find some property to build it on, that would be the big issue.
Yeah, that's why I asked about the county property
Yeah.
up in that area. And, you know, I know Horace mentioned infrastructure, and it's not the purview of this board, but I tend to disagree that infrastructure goes hand in hand with planning and future, and it needs to be a consideration. And when I talk about infrastructure, I talk about, as the gentleman said, utilities, we're talking about the roads, but also emergency services, schools, and then, of course, parks and things like that. So we have an opportunity to hopefully get things right when we review this and move forward. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Simmons.
Let me, and I do know, and I do know that our transportation department, Ms. George Young, who is the director, and Christine Fanchi. They are definitely involved, and I think Mr. Rusty Thomas, I met with them regarding some of those things that he had discussed, and I think he can confirm that regarding Quintet, all of those things in the Woodland Parkway. So there have been discussions on it. I just don't want to say anything that I don't have all the information on at this time, because again, it is a workshop. And if we say anything concrete and it's not certainty and not sure, it may come back to, it may have some unintended consequences. So I want to be clear with the right department being able to address all of those questions as he talked about.
Understood, Horace, I appreciate it.
Mr. Sammons?
Yeah, I have a question for the attorney, and I'm relatively certain I misunderstood this, so I just want to clarify. You said you went back to the county in the 2015-2006 time frame and asked for a reaffirmation that they were going to build their portion of the extension of the road?
Yes,
and you couldn't get it?
Mr. Sammons, what happened is, as I mentioned, in the original MOU included the previous owner of the properties. Mr. Hemmer and his investment group purchased the property from them, from their entities, after the sector plan was in place. Therefore, they were not a party to the original agreement. So what we went into to say, we are committed, we're letting you know, we're coming forward, we are committed to being a part of it. We will abide by the requirements of it and pay the monies that it required to move this thing forward. And what we were attempting to do at the time was to move it forward now, right, to get these roads, to start this building process so that we could start getting development moving forward. And at the time, it was all of the parties, the four parties, the two original landowners and the county, along with now Mr. Hemmer's group. We weren't able to meet an agreement differently than what was in place.
Okay, so you just couldn't move the timeline up?
Correct, yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions of the attorney? Okay, Mr. Hammer? Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you. Fred Hemmer, 207 East Intensia Street, Pensacola, Florida. Mr. Ringwell, your last comment was spot on. And I didn't understand, Horace, your comment about, trying to lift the sector plan without addressing the infrastructure. I don't see how that can be done. I think, as pointed out by several here, I think that would be a disaster. The MOU was signed years ago. We've tried to advance that. It hasn't worked. There's no teeth in it. When we came along and bought the property, we were not party to that agreement, and I think that's just a fundamental flaw. That's why we, engaged Clark Partington to redraft another agreement, working with the county staff, to try to get all the three large owners to sign a new document that would, detail out the layouts for the road, who's paying for what, et cetera, et cetera. There were complications associated with that. The county wasn't totally prepared where their road section was going to go. So Commissioner Berry went back to us and said, well, let's just sign an agreement with you for the first part of Quintet Road. That way you can get your first project, which is Woodland Hills, which we have the development order for, and we're going to get ready to start construction on that soon. So that agreement didn't get done, but it didn't eliminate the problems with the sector plan as we've all seen the last couple years. The subdivision that we have the development order for, Woodland Hills, that was done under the sector plan requirements, the DSAP requirements. We've worked with the staff, and it's all in compliance. Our next development is going in at the end of Matheson Road. It's going to be about 400 units in there. We were advised that we should submit those plans, assuming the sector plan has been removed. We have engaged Dewberry, David Tiller is here, to both do all that work on Matheson as well as a master plan for our whole project. Now that this discussion about removing the sector plan has come into play, it's obviously thrown a monkey wrench into our timing and our plans. And we have a lot of work invested on the Matheson layouts. all assuming the sector plan was going to be removed. Now I'm getting the idea that maybe that's not going to happen timely, and so my question to Horace, do we have to redesign these plans as if it's the sector plan? I don't need an answer right now this minute, but it's something that we need to address because we have contracts, we have requirements, we need that answer for that. But the overall thing I want to say is you've got to provide for the infrastructure now. You can't just lift the sector plan and not have the large 3 property owners agree for the donation of the road, agree to what they're going to construct, and the county to agree what they're going to construct. I just think that is a mistake. I don't think we'll ever get put back together if it's not done during this process. And, we stand by the commitment to do that. One comment on the school board. 4 or 5 years ago, we tried to donate land for the school board there. We actually, I was working with Sean Dennis and Malcolm Thomas, and we had the attorneys have reviewed it. We had an agreement all done except for one clause, and we were going to donate the land to the school board. The school board was going to then give us credit for any future impact fees that may be assessed to us. And we would think it was Rusty laid it out. I think it was 57 acres, and then it just, we called to say, where are we? And it just went away. We never got any return calls. So we went ahead and just included our master plan process, assuming that the school board had found property elsewhere in there. But we did try to address the infrastructure for the school board. Not knowing where we are with the roads, that affects our master planning process. And again, I got Dewberry on hold with that until this gets resolved. If we don't get Woodlands Parkway committed to building from the new interchange or proposed interchange all the way to the North County, our plan stops because we're isolated. We will then just have, one road going in Quintet, one road going out Matheson, no north-south continuity. And that's just not right. You need that north-south alternate route to 29 for evacuation purposes. And the way that it's laid out, and Rusty can talk about that more, that road could be taken all the way up to the Atmore cutoff. And in a hurricane situation, you could now have 2 routes, possibly double what you've got now. So anyway, I just want to say that as we go through this process, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, keep the integrity of the planning process intact. Without those roads, all that zoning is meaningless, and you will have a disaster on your hands. So we look forward to, working with you all, doing what we can do. We try to be responsible, good developers here, and we like to continue with that. So, any questions?
Mr. Hammer, you mentioned the Matheson Road development, and you were, someone recommended that you plan that with the assumption the sector plan would no longer exist. When was that? When were you told that?
2 months ago?
Oh, so it was recent.
Yeah.
Let's be clear. I did not tell them that. We did make them aware that the sector plan was being removed. I do know there have been discussions on the master planning project. I don't have anything in my records about any of those things. I just like to be clear for transparency, because I don't want to say what Mr. Jones said or my department said when we don't have all of the information, when it's not true. Also, I like to be clear again. When I made my comment about the infrastructure, I cannot make any commitments for the BCC. I was not part of those discussions, whether they engage with whomever they engage with. So I want to be clear. This department, my staff, cannot say, yes, the BCC going to do this. I don't have the authority to do that, nor do I want it, respectfully. But Ms. Christine Fashion, with transportation, she is here, and she's very, very good, and she can answer and try to address, if she can, questions regarding the infrastructure and those roadway networks that have been mentioned on this morning.
Horace, Mr. Hammer mentioned impact fees. I picked up on that. Has there been any discussion from the Board of County Commissioners about impact fees?
let me, and my assistant county administrator, she's here, and if I'm saying anything, please come up and correct me. There was some discussions a few months ago about that. We had discussions. No direction. Thank you.
Copy.
And it
Mr.
was,
Chair-
yes. So we had some discussion specifically about OLF8 as well, but there was no direction on the impact fees.
Ms. Hightower?
I just wanted to be on the record as saying the school board was never aware of that offer. I learned about it recently from someone else, and I was taken aback that we would turn down free property. We have to realize that we as school board members are given our information from those people you mentioned. And if anybody else on my board was aware of it, they never brought it to the board table. So I wanted to say thank you for your offer, and I'm sorry that things did not move forward.
Yeah, Stephen Shell was your attorney. I mean, this was a whole legal document that got done.
I am not doubting your word because I heard this from another source recently. We were talking about that brief conversation that went on with the county commission about impact fees, and this person called me and shared with me that that had happened. And I will follow up and find out where it landed, because the school board is charged with the buying and selling of property. But of course, it has to be recommended to us. So I don't know where it fell apart, but I have already sent an email to somebody to find out.
Okay. By the way, one more comment. As part of our Quintet extension, we have proposed, Dewberry has it in their master plan, for a sizable section off of Quintet to be for the county, for whatever services the county deems necessary up there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hammer.
Thank you. If we could have Fred Thompson come up, he could spend a
Yeah,
little more.
if we just hold 1 second, I just wanted to comment on Woodlands Parkway for just a moment. I've been on the planning board for quite some time, and one of the things that we regularly get criticized for is not planning. We are accused of being a reactionary board. For someone who lives in this area, I actually live very close to where all of this is happening. I could tell you that this is, right now, everybody listen to me carefully, this is the biggest opportunity that this county has to plan something that will benefit many years in the future. I live up here. I was almost late to the meeting this morning because of the increase in traffic. It's not going to stop. There's new subdivisions all along State Road 97, 297. There's obviously going to be more development up here. This road is necessary. I hope that it is a high priority for everyone within the county. We look at the huge amount of development that has happened in Beulah. The exchange is obviously moving forward, and with the development of OLF8, all of that traffic funnels through exit 5. So whether you could go over to Pine Forest, but for the most part, anyone coming out of this part of the county comes down, cuts through the little road, Pine Cone, and ends up at exit 5, or they come in off Highway 90. The creative people actually that live up this way go over to Beulah Road and go down, and they still end up at exit 5, okay? I know because I've searched every possible way there is to go. Opening an interstate exchange and moving this forward, Mr. Hammer and the attorney both said, will give an evacuation route, which is desperately needed, especially for all of the new development out in the Beulah area, because right now, to move north, you have to move east first, and then try to move north or east or west if you get on the interstate. So this would provide an opportunity. I foresee that the development will continue. It's better for us as a planning agency to have the development where the services are, where it can be added on to easily. And I think that, like I said, I'll say it again to everyone who's listening. I hope the commissioners, I hope the transportation organization, everybody hears it. This is the biggest opportunity this county has and will have for many years to come. If we don't make this happen, you're going to have a lot of issues up in the north end of the county. So this is something that I think should take very high priority and you know, given that consideration. So, yes, sir.
I agree wholeheartedly with the chairman, and it's our opportunity to get it right, to be a planning board.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hemmer. Mr. Thompson? Mr. Thompson is an engineer, and you're going to speak to some of the technical aspects of these roadway developments and everything like that.
Thank you.
All
Fred
right,
Thompson,
thanks,
7142 Belgium Circle. I was the original project manager for the sector plan. I'm the guy that went to the county, talked to Miss Thompson there, who's no relative of mine, and talked to Miss Thompson and worked out a plan to go and develop the sector plan for these 3 large landowners. That's the way it started. The reason for the sector plan is, I'm not sure if any of you ever had the opportunity to work with a DRI, Development Regional Impact Study. They're nightmares. They require you to go in and plan everything you're going to do for the next 10 years without change. And that's hard to do because our economy affects it, just hundreds of things. So we went to the sector plan. And the key to the sector plan was our roadway. It is, as Mr. Dunaway explained, it is the spine to everything that's going on. That roadway is placed by us, by me primarily, and I have walked every inch of it from beginning to end. We started out with our 3 developers, and we got Wetland Science to go out there, and I laid out a preliminary route. And I said, tell me what impact I'll have on the environment in these areas. And they did that. We brought it all the way through, and we moved that road around as much as we could to provide as little impact on the wetlands as possible. On Mr. Brannon's property in the south, we had some major changes we had to make to his because of some wetlands that crossed there, and we were able to do that. That roadway is at about as high upland property as we can get and will provide the least impact to what's going on. The other point that I would like to make out about our road system is this. We fell short in this regard. We went to the Naval Air Station and talked with them because they were talking about evacuation routes. After Ivan, people could not get out of Pensacola fast enough. It was a nightmare. We talked to them about bringing the road down and right into the back of their property. And we can do that. You're going through international paper property. It'd be a reasonable thing to do. We looked at that. We looked at going north. Hey, if I take this road on up and I project it straight on through, I've got one landowner there, and then I cross over and I've got a county road that goes in the back, and I can carry it all the way to the Atmore Cutoff Road. Then I only need 2 deputies to control traffic. One at this intersection and one at 29. That's ideal. It would provide the access that people need at Perdita Key that can't get out. So all in all, this road system is critical to everything that we're talking about doing. And you need to see how it affects us as a planner. In the planning aspect of this, what happens is we want to keep as much traffic within our development as possible. That's what this roadway does. We have a town center. So I hadn't got to go and get on 29. They just expanded 29 and they're gonna carry it further north, as I understand. Well, wait a minute. We don't need to be on that roadway if we can get out of it. That's good planning. And this system will provide us the mechanism to stay in-house in our developments so that we can stay off of 29 and not add to the clutter of traffic that we're all facing right now. This road is placed as well as it can be engineered, in my opinion. We can go in and build this road with minimal difficulty. We have some wetland crossings in there. In our MOU, when we started this, we put in a proviso in there that said, hey, county, because we're going to get this as a county road, what we want you to do is help us with the permitting, because you can do things that we can't. We have enough land in here, and we're putting enough areas in conservation that we don't have a concern about satisfying the Corps or DEP with what we have to give up for these crossings. It's already there. We're going to save it anyway. So we did that. All these things have been taken into account for this road system. And as Mr. Brisky said, this, to me, is the most important road system this county has faced in the last 20 years. With this, we can help our community have a better evacuation route, provide to service this development of a number of homes, and provide for the county a good route to the north other than 29. Thank you. I'll answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Dunaway, did you have anyone else in your group that you wish to speak at this time?
No, sir.
Okay. Mr. Brandon, David Brandon. It's all right. We have a coffee fund, and we'll just charge you $5 for it.
Okay, I'll do that when, I'll pay it when we open the roads. Okay.
You see, we don't have any coffee either.
Yeah.
As Mr. Thompson mentioned, I'm David Brandon at 10480 Tower Ridge Road, Pensacola.
Mr. Brandon, would you move just a little closer to the microphone so it picks up? Thank you, sir.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
All right. I was one of the original three, and I mean, it's so long ago, it's hard to believe. I think I bought the property in '06, and you don't normally buy a piece of property and try to hold on for 20 years almost to do something. But when I bought it, the county actually asked me to be part of the sector plan that Rusty had talked about. I had no idea what a sector plan was at that time, but it was supposed to go, like he said, to Atmore, and it sounded like a great idea at the time, because that was the only chance to get an evacuation route. Now, if we don't take that, do that now, it's going to go away. At one time, we had it where there was not a single house that had to be bought to get from where the new ramp will be to Atmore. And we even had an agreement with some of the Indians at Atmore. They were going to buy into our project. It went pretty far. I thought it was actually going to happen. But, we signed this agreement in '07 or '08 with the MOU, and, a lot of things were supposed to happen on both sides, and none of that did. And so nothing really has happened in that whole time. We tried to redo it, several years ago, and we had our attorneys. I had Emmanuel Shepard Condon representing me, and Mr. Dunaway was with the other groups. It was just a lot of time we spent, and nothing happened at that point either. And so, I want to just be involved in the workshops when y'all get to the point of doing this. We don't really have anything specific to say today, but we've never agreed to any kind of impact fees. That came up on specific developments with Mr. Dunaway's group. Our group's open really to a lot of options, But, you know, the MOU, unfortunately, the county had said it was dead years ago. So, you know, I'm not quite sure where the legal issues stand at this point, but we're very interested in getting something going. We want to develop. Kingsfield Road is very important. You mentioned everybody trying to come through to get to this area. They go down Beulah Road, they go down to exit 5, whatnot, but they also go down Kingsfield Road, which is not really a road. That was a path years ago used for horses and carriages. Is never even dedicated to the county. I don't know how much of the county owns now, but you can't really expand the road that's there. That's why we got to do that new one that goes through our property. So, you know, we're very interested in proceeding, but, you know, definitely want to be on any kind of notification list and get busy and get something to happen.
David, I'm sorry, Mr. Could you let us know what property? I know that corporation and LLCs, they change us all of the time.
Exit 1.
You still exit 1?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you have an attorney representing you, or you don't have to? I just want to know so we can know
Well, yeah, we
to make
had Emmanuel
contacts.
Shepherd and Condon, Robert Emanuel, but we've since changed. There's another gentleman there working it. Plus, we're going to have a consultant involved.
Okay.
You know, with this.
Okay. So just reach out to me and give me all your contact information
Sure.
so that that's why, because we know that there was with this workshop, we really want to have everybody come in. So we know there's a lot of challenges, issues as far as infrastructure. We definitely we are aware of that. But at this workshop, we want to basically have everyone come in and just talk about it so we can know and get contacts, because it's been so long ago since I've been in speaking to y'all about this
You were
matter.
there at the beginning. Maybe you may not have been the first year or two, but you were there.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Before we had
Yes,
this sector plan signed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you exit 1 and make sure we contact me, give me all of your parcel maps, and I know Fred, y'all can do the same. So we'll make sure we want everybody, but we do know that y'all are large land owners, so we can make sure that we track and have everybody with the public notification, not just for the development groups. I want to say that again, for everybody. But we do know y'all have investment backing. We want to make sure that y'all are aware and stay in the loop as well.
Right, and my major partners are Brian Elstock, Justin Whitcomb.
Okay.
They're attorneys in town. But I bought this thing a long time ago. I think it was
did.
Longview Plantation, and
Yes,
I brought
sir.
in Brian and Justin.
And you primarily with the Muskogee DSAP, right? That's where your primary property is?
I'm the southern DSAP. I'm
Yes, sir.
almost 100% of it. If there's
Okay.
anything else,
The regional
I'm not
employment,
aware of it.
okay.
And, you know, so it's really just our group controls that part.
Yes, sir.
And it's the regional employment, which is, you know, that should be the future land plan now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or anything?
Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Christian Wagley. Morning, sir.
Morning, board members. Christian Wagley, representing Healthy Gulf. I know I've appeared before you before, but just a reminder, we're a nonprofit organization that works on waterway issues all along the Gulf of Mexico coast. So we're based in New Orleans. I'm based here in Pensacola and work mainly in the Panhandle of Florida in a variety of communities, a lot in Walton County, a lot in Santa Rosa County, and also here in Escambia County. And we take great interest in land use issues because really anymore, most of the issues we deal with in our creeks and our bays and our bayous come from what happens on the land. So I want to begin by just saying that regional planning works. What the sector plan is doing works. You know, government has a legitimate public interest in how land is used. When we use it well and we use it wisely, we meet a whole range of goals that relate to protecting the environment, developing a better economy, you know, even many social issues as well. And so what the sector plan really attempts to do is to see more smarter land use patterns. You know, we've had this pattern in America of spreading everything out everything around the automobile. And what we've come to realize is that that's the most expensive way for government to, it's more difficult for government to provide services that way. It results in much, much larger impacts to much larger areas of land. I'm often fond of saying that, I think people are our greatest resource in the community. What people do is amazing. But land is our greatest physical resource. And societies that use land poorly, many of them have gone away in the history of our civilization. So land is our greatest physical resource. The sector plan works to use that land more efficiently, more wisely, to make it so that government can better provide services. And we do so in a way that provides more reasonable protection of, one of our primary interests being the waterways, the creeks, the rivers in those areas, so that we concentrate development in certain areas where it's easier to provide services. And we help to preserve the larger areas of open space that are most valuable for wildlife, most valuable for aquifer recharge, carbon sequestration, all the benefits that provides. So I do want to ask about data and analysis. I know that anytime we want to make decisions, and especially to throw something out, we want to have analysis as to why we're doing that, why that's justified. Right now we have a directive from the Board of County Commissioners that we look into this, or really that we do this. We would be better inclined to make a good decision here if we have the data and analysis. I'm not sure if it's legally required or not, but it would certainly be required in order to make a better, well-informed decision for this board and the Board of County Commissioners. So I do want to ask about that. And I also want to ask clearly what I think is in the mind of many people, certainly the citizens who are interested in and invested in the benefits that were going to come from the sector plan and have come from it, is what would replace it? What would replace that to ensure orderly growth in this area? According to the Bureau of Business and Economic Research at the University of Florida, which is really the keeper of population statistics for Florida, we're looking at nearly 40,000 new people, or increase in population in Escambia County over the next 20 years. Where are they going to go? Well, probably most of them are going to go into this particular area because that's the path of least resistance, right? That's the biggest area of land that's available. It's high and dry, unlike most of southwest Escambia County. So what would replace in order to ensure orderly growth? What's on the books now doesn't really do that. We end up with dead-end subdivisions. We end up with land use patterns that absolutely guarantee traffic congestion by forcing every car trip onto one single road. I don't see anything in the absence of this kind of plan, that's going to help us have that more orderly growth patterns in the future. So I do want to ask what potentially would replace this, and potentially not to throw it out until we have something in place that would replace it. The savings clause, I'm not sure I entirely understand it, but it almost appears like I want to have my cake and eat it too. My understanding of the sector plan is that a whole bunch of new development rights were granted to property owners in that area in return for responsibilities, right, in terms of building to a higher level, higher standard, more walkable, easier provision of public services, right? There's rights and there's responsibilities, and so both were given in that sense. If we take this away, we're continuing to allow for the maximum rights, but we've taken away the responsibilities that the sector plan provides. Again, and those responsibilities are there to provide for the public interest. And so I do want to ask about that, certainly. And then finally, I think just to wrap up, the choices that this board makes, that the Board of County Commissioners, that the staff, that this community makes, the choices we make about future growth are critical. And I would argue they're maybe the most critical issue we face into our future and what kind of Escambia County we're going to have. Again, those 40,000 people are coming. There's no stopping that. How we accommodate them is going to make the difference about whether this is a place that's going to be economically healthy, environmentally healthy, socially healthy. This is a place where we're going to want to live. So I encourage you to ask these questions and have a really full discourse on all of this. So thank you for your time, and thanks for considering my comments. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Mr. Wagley? All right, thank you. John York? Okay. Okay, all right, thank you. Anyone else who hasn't spoken or would like to say anything else again? Okay. All right, Horace, we're going to turn it back over to you then and let you kind of wrap up where we're going with everything.
Okay. So again, thank you for entertaining, for having the workshop today. Again, we do have a lots of comments and concerns that were made. So staff will begin to looking at all of these things again, Ms. Debbie Bowers, I'm glad that she's here. As far as those things that I cannot answer or cannot address, but we will continue moving forward with this directive. We're asking for everyone that have any concerns. This is the thing, and I want to say this publicly. Please contact the Development Service Department or the Engineering Department regarding any of those needs. Sometimes it's hard when so much wrong information get out. It's hard for us to try to run that down, and we cannot. And it causes a lot of challenges for my department. So if you have any questions concerning your parcels within the sector plan, please reach out to us. You can call me. I give people my phone number all the time. It doesn't matter because it's a county number. The county gave me this phone number. I didn't give it my own. 850-554-8210. That's the county number. You can reach me on that phone. You can call me. You can email me, hljones@myscambia.com. You email me. I may not contact you the same day, but I will reach back out to you because we want to try to be as open, as transparent, and as engaging as we possibly can. Because it's going to be a precarious project. It's going to be a delicate project. We're asking everyone to please work with us as we proceed with the directives, along with all of the things that were said today. So that's all I can say at this point.
Horace, I had a follow-up question when it comes to Woodlands Parkway. We have a regional transportation authority or organization, I guess it's called the TPO. If I remember correctly, this, as well as I guess loop is as good a word as possible going over to Santa Rosa County, was all part of that transportation plan at some time. Is that still on their radar as well?
I do not have an answer to that, but maybe Ms. Christine Fanchi, if she have any information, maybe she can address that. I'm not trying to put on the spot, but she'll be better suited to, if you have any questions concerning that. I'm learning how to stay in my lane.
He's putting you on the spot.
He's not going to put me on the spot.
But go to the microphone.
I'm Christine Fanchi. I'm your transportation engineer for the county. My understanding of that connector on the priorities list, okay, so there's the LRTP, which is the Long Range Transportation Plan. These roadways are on that list, right? And then there's the 5-year work program for FDOT, which funnels all our federal money through to basically be programmed. And no roadways within the sector plan are in the 5-year work plan. We are very hopeful that the Beulah Interchange is going to be funded for construction in the 5th year. We'll find out next month. The right-of-way for Beulah Interchange is programmed in 25 and 26 years. So that's the closest thing that I can tell you that's funded in the 5-year plan. So between those two documents is what's called the priorities list, which is an unfunded priority for Escambia and Santa Rosa, which is our regional list. And we have a project called the US 29 Connector. It's priority number 9, and it's basically Beulah Road between 9 Mile and Muskogee, and it's called US 29 Connector on that. It's unfunded, and it would have to be basically a design project south of I-10 and then a PD&E process north of I-10. There is discussions right now about the work that we are doing on Kingsfield Road Extension to get that plan ready for construction with county. And so there is discussions right now with the Beulah Interchange being such a priority to be funded. What happens with connecting that better to Kingsfield? So those discussions are happening right now, but none of it is funded, if that makes sense.
Okay. And so what influence does the county commission have on moving items more into the priority category in the TPO?
So the good news is that all 5 of our commissioners are on the TPO board.
Okay.
And so they have a very good influence. Commissioner Berry is the outgoing chair. We have a Santa Rosa County chair that'll start in the October meeting, and he'll be the chair for the year. And then Commissioner Bender is teed up to be the chair starting October of next fall. So not that that really matters because we still have 5 votes, but we do have influence there, and that board sets the priorities and how things move up the chain. So to answer your question, yes, they have
Okay, have you heard of any discussions of trying to increase something like this on the priority list? I know that the interchange has been a hot issue, but this Woodlands Parkway going to the north and then eventually connecting in.
So to be honest, the interchange has been the highest priority, and I haven't heard anything really beyond that. It sounds like we're really focusing on the interchange.
Okay.
So I think it'd be a good discussion for kind of what's after that. But I know those discussions are happening with the state of kind of how do we connect better? To your point earlier, people are moving to this area. How do we connect better?
Okay.
So, thank you very much.
Questions? All right. Yes, sir. Mr. Dunaway? Mr. Brandon, I'll recognize you next, sir.
Sir, I just want to make one particular point. We were hoping that we would hear from Mr. Jones, and I'm just going to ask him specifically about a potential timeline. You will not be surprised to know that we provided a timeline that had this, you would be voting on this in your next meeting. It is clear to me that based on what this presentation today is that is not going to happen. Again, we're planning subdivisions right now and moving forward. So we're trying to figure out what to do. So it would be very helpful, even if it were a broad brush, to have some idea from the planning department when we might see this back before you so that we could have a planning timeline to operate under. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And again, my plan could have it approved by January of 2022 if Mr. Jones would agree to it.
Here's a broad brush, a broad paintbrush, a big one. Okay, staff, number one, staff would definitely be engaging more with my administrators concerning the engagement of a consultant with this project, because as Mr. Wagley stated, detailed analysis is part of this process. That's a statutory requirement. We cannot get around that. So we will definitely be engaging with them on the hiring of a consultant, trying to get that through. The next thing is that staff will continue to, hopefully, we have other private property that will start reaching out to us, so that, because we just don't have these two projects, there's other development groups out there. We need for them to solicit. I don't want no one to say, well, no one told me about it, I want part of the meeting. That would not be good. So we're trying to make sure we get all the interested parties engaged in this process. That's the next thing. Thank you, Mr. Brandon. Please send me your information. Fred, y'all, please send me y'all maps. We know that you don't want to make things public record, but it's better for us sometimes to have those documents so we can make a true assessment, especially when it comes to nonconformity and having inconsistencies. So that's going to be critical. The next thing is that if the board requires so we can get a consultant, we start looking at the data, scrubbing the data. There may be some more meetings with the planning board, workshops. So hopefully, this is a very, very broad brush because the holidays are coming. We know that. Holidays are here. Between February and March. That's a long time frame, but it's what we have to work with. This is not an easy level. So I'm saying there's those items that you want to submit to us, it's wise to do so. Submit them. Let's get them before the planning board, because the sector plan is still the law of the land, the law of Escambia County. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It is the law of the land. So I cannot make no commitments concerning things that the TPO does and the roadway network and those. We just have to continue to have discussions on that. That's just honest. That's just open and it's honest with you. But hopefully, between February and March, we should have this thing either in the hands of the BCC or in Tallahassee, because the holidays are coming. And there are other projects. There's other things we're working on as well. So That's a paintbrush, and that's the best that I can do at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brandon?
I just wanted to address the issue of the other roads going north. The FDOT has been anxious for the county to show some skin in the game all along, and one thing they need is a north road. They don't want to put in an interstate, and it's not going anywhere. So this road that, the Parkway, it's the practical answer to that, and it would go up to at least to the new Kingsfield extension, and then north of that it should go through up to Fred Hemmer's property and all that. But they should at least put the north road in to the new Kingsfield Road, which Steve Barry had said he was going to put in 2 years ago and had it all funded. We thought to go from 97 over to Beulah. So these things have been talked about for years, but there should be, at least that portion should come with the interstate.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
And I want to go back to my timeline. Hopefully it'll be shorter, hopefully not longer, but I cannot make no promises, because there are some things that we definitely have to engage in with legal, with administrators, and see if we can. Infrastructure is going to be a big piece, as you can see, that was said today. So that's the purpose of these workshops, to try to bring everybody to the table and have some open and honest dialogue, which I'm glad that we had this morning, and hopefully we'll continue to have the dialogue that is necessary.
Okay. Tim?
Horace, can you tell me, on the people that have opted out to date, do you have like an idea of the size of properties that they have dealt with? Meaning, are they typically smaller acreage, smaller residential?
They have typically been smaller acreage. John, please correct me. Nothing large or massive. Typically smaller acreage. I think the largest one probably had was Mr. and Mrs. Westmark. Yeah, that was the largest one. Yeah, thank you, John.
And how big was the Westmarks? Well, the reason I ask, because it seems like, once again, when an individual case comes in front of us, it seems completely, it seems right and logical for them to be able to opt out.
Mm-hmm.
And for, multiple reasons of why they were punished by this sector plan. Whereas now we look at it from the aggregate, and it's completely logical to keep it in place. I mean, what idiot wouldn't? And I think that one of the things I concur with Chair, that we have a tendency to not embrace the development, that try to make development the evil doer in the background. And, I think that we have an opportunity to, going forward, to maybe plan something. Otherwise, we're subject to every individual quasi-judicial issue in here, where we're back and forth with the people in every small section. Now, how in the world do we navigate this, where we're able to honor the fact that they've been here since 2006 is insane, and we've written legal documents of understanding that they're going to have something. They've put the money together. I understand completely. Right now, the time is ticking. Those consultants and those engineers, they're going to get paid. And somebody's having to pay for it. And that's what nobody ever wants to talk about. Somebody has to write a check. Now, they'd rather say in public, oh, I'm against these developers. Don't develop in my backyard. Don't develop here. Because they're greedy. Well, the risk is huge, obviously. They're paying the price right now. And their reward should be equally as large. And that's just the way it is. But it's so much easier to make them out to be nefarious evildoers. But how do we protect the macro and give an opt-out to the people who have their 2 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres, and never signed up for the DSAP, or the sector plan, and are screaming, I want my property rights? I mean, we've got to figure out, because this looks like, no offense, but when we start talking about a consultant and everything else, to me, February, March, good luck. I mean, really, but how do we decide? Do we keep it and deal with it? Or do we get rid of it and have to cobble something together? What's the avenue? I mean, I see what it says by our commissioners when they give us direction. It's almost like we need to get rid of it, but somehow keep the good stuff. What is the most reasonable option? Are we going to keep it and have an opt-out? Or are we going to be able to get rid of it and cobble something together that makes sense to people who have invested stuff since 2006? I mean, I want a workshop. I like talking. Don't get me wrong, but man, we got to figure out a direction.
Mr. Powell, and that's those are some, you made some valid points, and it's and hopefully we will work something, get something. It's again whatever. It's not going to be no perfect answer, but again, I think the direction is to try to get those parcel owners, the ones that have a reasonable back-end investment, try to make them whole. Then something else and another alternative may come along with this. I do not know. I do know infrastructure is a big piece. That's beyond my point. So I'm not trying to water it down at all. At this point, I just don't want to say anything and promises that I just don't have to answer the information to. Our transportation department, they definitely working on these things. So hopefully the direction is here and we'll get something that we may not have where everybody can win-win. When negotiation, everybody not gonna get everything they want, but we can have a win-win for everybody to get and be made whole, try to have proper balance and proper perspective. That's all any planning. And one thing about planning, we can plan, but you gotta have funds. Funding is mandatory. So because many times I have plans right now but if there's no funds to do certain things, they're just sitting on the desk. So again, we haven't had no development, number of subdivisions. So it's all of those things have to be considered. So your comments, they're valid, Mr. Powell. I'm not trying to water it down. At this point, I just don't have enough information to give you.
Okay, can I throw one more thing out there just for the fun of it? I'm sorry. So in the past, somebody at some point in time came up with the PUD, right? Is there even a thought process and Chairman Brisky, make fun of me, I don't really care. I just hope that we can kind of push something forward. But is there a way to come up with a PSD, a planned section development? I mean, something where we can outline clearly and concisely, if you are over X amount of acreage and you're putting a development, that you put together just like a planned urban development. And it should not be any more cost prohibitive than any other permitting, and it has to be clear and consistent and not punitive financially to them, because it's already a huge, I'm just throwing it out there. Is that an option if you took away the sector plan, that they would have to go for a planned sector development? I don't know. I really have nothing but throwing stuff against the wall at this point.
All those things are probable possibilities. That's why we have legal to look at all of those issues through agreements or things like that. So those ideas are there. They're here. Maybe they could help as well. Because again, we do know it's not going to be easy as far as this. But we do want to try to get a win-win for everybody. Again, everybody's not going to be happy. And that's not my direction. But so that everybody have a win-win. That's how you negotiate in a fair and equitable process.
Tim, I mean, I don't want to belabor it. I would just think that the major difference that we would be looking at would be with a sector plan like we have going through the Department of Economic Opportunity versus something where we would have statutory control over land development, more like a PUD or something like that, doesn't have to go in there. So I think that's a pretty big delineation between the two where, allowing the county to have the flexibility would be important, because as soon as you start putting in it's things that have to go to the Department of Economic Opportunity. You just
Very
add a
messed
whole
up. Messy.
layer of complication to it.
Yes.
So I'd be more in favor of having it as more local county control than doing something like that.
And that's the, Mr. Bridge, and that's the easiest route, that's the easier route, it really is. So that's what we gotta, that's what we can look at, all of those things, all of those considerations, working with the stakeholders. Because again, Tallahassee already said we can't, it's all or nothing. We can't keep one thing and do all that. So they've said that thoroughly and aggressively to us, that you cannot keep one and do the other. So localize, planning, issues, working together, collaboration, that's what make good planning documents.
Mr. Sammons?
Yeah, I think Mr. Powell had some very interesting things to say, and it just reminds me of when the Westmarks and others were here, appealing for their I can't even think of what it is.
Opt-out.
Opt-out.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Yes, sir.
It's tough getting old. Anyhow, if you remember then, most of the objections to what the Westmarks wanted to do and others that wanted to opt out is that this was so they could develop the property. It was the evil developer. And I find it interesting that we're sitting here talking to some large landowners that want to do the development, and they're in favor of the sector plan. And you've got this balance that I don't know how to deal with. And I said at the very first meeting, and I'm glad you said win-win. I don't think that's possible. You probably can get closer than to what I pessimistically think is going to be the outcome. I believe in you. I believe you're going to get a lot closer than that. But at the time I said, man, it's a lose-lose. Somebody in this deal's going to lose because they've invested in property one way or the other. But in the grand scheme of things, I think that property owners ought to have some property rights. And so I found myself agreeing with the Westmark's position often. In this particular case, my emphasis would be on this, is that as we go through this thing, anything we do is gonna create future complaints
Yes, sir.
about us doing it, and we ought to go to extreme measures to communicate with the property owners. Even if that means talking to the people that send them their cell bills or their power bills or whatever, and see if they can't tag on something in that. Lord knows the power company will shoot me for recommending that. And they may not go along with it, but there's got to be a way to more directly reach these people. So even though I'm not interested in having 300 people in the room, if I can help, if I can get a good result without that, I'm all for it. I just like to see us eliminate that being an issue to the greatest degree we possibly can.
Mr. Sampson you said a mouthful there, and this is the thing I understand. A lot of times people are not interested in planning projects. A lot of times people are not interested in planning projects until it hit their backyard, until it hit them. I could be honest with you, they don't mind getting the most, maximizing their development on their own property. But if somebody else come and want to try to maximize their potential, oh no, we don't want it. But you want to sell your property for $100,000 to develop, but you don't want a developer. I'm just saying, questions out here all the time. But you're trying to delay or hinder or cause disruption, that's a better term, on the private property. It got to be equity and fairness and balance across the board. Because a lot of people, you're removing land use controls. These land use controls that we have already in place for the agriculture, they still gonna be in there. They still gonna be in there. You're still gonna have the same process for development. Public meetings, agriculture, protections, they still in there. So we're just basically those parcels owners that right now, if you remove them, and they're gonna have inconsistencies. If someone already good, they say, oh, thank you. I don't want them to come up there anyway. I hear that every single day. I like my property where it is. I'm fine. So all of those things, and that's I'm aware of. So, and I know that y'all board is. So that's why we just want to have open and honest conversation with understanding going forward that everybody's not going to be happy. But if we can achieve that win-win, then I can retire in the next 5 years.
I'm counting on you.
Horace, is it reasonable to ask yourself and staff to put forward a for and an against argument? Maybe, and I'm not trying to, the reason I'm asking you is because you're the professional. Now, when I can consume this as much and have both sides brought to me, to Mr. Salmon's point, you get in here during a quasi-judicial and it's much more emotional. I don't care what we have in front of us, but when you have 300 people screaming at you no, and one yes, is it possible for county staff to possibly assign a project manager for and a project manager against, and have regular meetings and milestones where all the stakeholders are invited and put forth the arguments as clear and as concisely as they can, and say at the next workshop that we have, maybe in the next following month. I mean, I don't want any more than anyone else does. It's hard enough to make, once, but if we have, here's option A for and here's option B against. In option A for, this is how we keep the good and keep out the bad. In option B against, this is how we protect these people who signed this understanding in 2006. Is it possible to try to just, because again, we can hire the consultants and they can get paid to speak as long as possible. I should be a consultant. I could talk in circles and we still wouldn't get anything done. But if the staff, every other time we have to make a pretty important decision, we're given either direction and or sometimes you painfully try to be objective and steer clear of any direction. I would ask if you had one for, one against, how would we deal with either one? We just currently, I feel like I've made a lot of comparisons to Central Florida. This will be like I-4. It'll always be constructed for the next 5 years, and it'll always be 15 years too late. We will never have 29. We'll be worked on forever, and it'll never be big enough or wide enough or fast enough to get the heck out of Dodge. And I believe with everything, they say that we do need an alternate course. And it sounds in the macro, well, why in the heck would we ever walk away from this? Until we think back, and not too distant past, where individual rights seem to be completely squashed by this. And why in the world would you keep it? So again, we're kind of back and forth. I understand the county commissioners want to, ask for the planning board to do their job. And I would ask the guys that are professionals, men and women of your staff, again, not trying to put the onus on you, but give us a good for and against, and then let us debate it. And then we got to move, because otherwise we'll just be in this circle forever.
We do have those. Again, this is not the first time the staff have had this conversation. We do have a pros and the cons, and the Board of County Commissioners, they was engaged at that time. We even presented something here before this planning board, start beginning in 2014, and I believe that's when I'm not going to say this, but that's when Ms. Crawford, she was on board with us as well. With the pros and the cons for the move or the keep. We went to Tallahassee, and some people said, well, can we keep the sector, can we keep the DSAPs and not the sector plan? I got information galore on all of that. So that is available, and with this direction going, we'll make it part of the program, the proposed program going forward. Unless I hear other direction, I must state this, unless I have other direction from county administration, I think that the directive at this point is to engage in removal. At this point, unless I hear after today's meeting and they tell me something else, at this point, the directive is to yet engage with moving forward with all the considerations given today as well. And unless they tell me different, that's a directive that we have at this point.
And just for the record, I'm generally in favor of that, but I think we need to find some solutions to resolve the rest of this issue, because I think they've got legitimate points.
Yes, sir. Understood. So noted. Yes, sir.
The commission has the opportunity to address those items that we're contemplating through an agreement with those developers in those cases. Is that correct? So we could move forward with the removal of the sector plan, but also have administrative agreements with those parties. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. It would just be up to the Board of County Commissioners to enter into those agreements.
Okay. And I feel like from the direction that we've been given so far, they would be more apt to do something like that than keeping the sector plan and trying to work out the details on that. Just what I read into it, but we'll have to see. Okay. Anyone else? All right. Thank you all for participating. A lot of great information. We'll take it all into consideration. Horace, you got a freight train running behind you, so you got to run. It's coming. Our next regularly scheduled planning board meeting will be the October 5th meeting here in this room. I'm sorry, we have 2 cases at this point for quasi?
It'll be a flu change and then the last hearing for the planning board for the LDC OLF 8.
So we don't have rezonings on that day?
No, but
Okay.
November is very busy.
November, maybe like 6.
Okay. Y'all couldn't spread them out a little bit? All right, if there's nothing else for this workshop, then we are adjourned and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.